John, there is a fascinating game happening about 10 minutes from my house that I think the home crowd is more interested in what happens after the game, maybe than what happens during the game. And that's Florida, Texas. But the during the game part is pretty interesting too. Texas is a 7-point favorite. The total on this is 42.5 as we record this. I really don't know what to expect here because I don't know what version of Arch Manning's coming. And then I'm not entirely sure what Florida's defense is going to look like with the injuries they've had.
Yeah, you might be unsure, but bettors aren't. This line has moved from 6.5 to 7 for Texas as a road favorite, and nearly 90% of money is on the Longhorns to cover. So an interesting spot for sure. We haven't seen a lot from this Texas team, at least against good competition. Florida struggling right now, but their season could bounce back here with an impressive win. And we've seen in the Billy Napier era, the Gators are 6-3 straight up and against the spread as home underdogs. So just because they're on a slide right now, historically, they've been able to keep it close at least when they're getting points in the swamp.
Ooh, that is interesting.
Yeah,
John, I picked Texas to cover here. My alma mater has not. It has been kind to me in terms of my picks because I keep getting them right, but it doesn't make the people around here happy.
Everybody picked them. I picked them too. John, when you see a betting split like this, where the position seems to be on the other side, how often is the public correct?
Yeah, the betting's even more lopsided when you talk about the money line and parlays. You're getting over 90% of the action is on Texas just to win this game. It's a very popular parlay play going into Saturday. But we see this all the time. 7 points is a lot on the road, especially against a conference opponent. So would I be shocked if they win but don't cover? No, of course not.
All right, let's stay in the SEC, John, because you've got an interesting stat on Kirby Smart against the spread as a giant favorite in conference games because Kentucky's coming to town, so Georgia's favored by almost 3 touchdowns.
That's right, 20.5-point favorites. A lot of money, 80% is on Georgia to get the cover. But we've seen in the Kirby Smart era, Georgia's just 8-17 against the spread as a favorite of 20 or more points against SEC teams. And in the last 7 such instances, they failed to cover each time. So really tough spot here. Big favorite. Georgia should win, but that number is where we're going to, that's going to be the interesting part of this game.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me too that like when you put out a stat like that of big favorite in SEC play, and everybody views Georgia as this like infallible giant that just beats the crap out of everybody, and then you go back and you look at that stat and it's just like, well, maybe taking the points in this scenario actually is the smart thing to do. I always struggle with what my brain is telling me, and I think that's like the number one most difficult thing about betting in general is like when you're a fan or a consumer of the sport, we all have our general notions of how games should go, but a lot of times they don't go that way. Like, is there going to be a fumble in the first quarter that turns into a touchdown? That'll be the difference. And I'm just so fascinated by, how they, how they keep putting out these lines and just people will just go, well, Georgia's going to win by 100. Bang.
Right. I mean, that's why the spread makes games interesting because Georgia winning, no one would doubt that. But by how much? That's why we watch.
Now, one where I'm not sure who wins, and I'm fascinated to see, how bettors are handling this one. So you got Iowa State, Cincinnati. Cincinnati, one of the more surprising teams in the Big 12. They went and beat Kansas last week. They are actually favored against Iowa State in Cincinnati at Nippert Stadium. Iowa State undefeated, one of the better teams in the Big 12, or so we think. So how is this one moved, and what are people looking at here?
We're seeing balanced action on this game. The line hasn't moved at all, but in the Matt Campbell era, Iowa State, they cover the spread 60% of the time as an underdog, 28-19 against the spread, and they've won 6 of their last 7 games when getting points. So they're not unfamiliar being a dog. So this is a situation. I always like Matt Campbell, especially when he gets the points, just because he's covered so often for me.
What other games jump out to you this week, John?
Alabama Vandy, obviously really interesting here. Bama open 12.5. It's been bet down to 10.5. Diego Pavia, since he came to Vandy, 7-1 against the spread of a dog as a dog of 7 or more points.
Dog. The number 1 dog in college football. That is our inside joke on the show, John, that if we did dog rankings, like who's the biggest dog in college football, it's obviously Diego Pavia. And this just reinforces that.
Because there's 2 meanings on that. Dog and dog, you know?
Yeah, the audience gets that part, Ari.
Yeah, no, I know. But I'm just catching up. You know, I'm on the
I mentioned Florida earlier as a really popular parlay on the money line as a leg in parlays. Alabama's even more so. It's well over 90% of all bets are on Alabama when you include parlays. So if Pavia and Vandy could pull the upset, that would be a good outcome for the sportsbook.
You know, Andy, what he's basically saying.
So gamblers bet this line down because they thought the spread might be too high, but they still think Alabama's going to win the game outright, essentially is what you're saying.
Yep, exactly.
What people do, Andy, is if they don't want to bet the spread, they'll do like a 3 or 4 game money line parlay where they pick the favorites and they hope all the favorites win, which basically is what John is saying is that Florida's going to win or Vanderbilt's going to win or someone's going to win this week that blows a hole in all those parlays, because it's very easy to be like, well, I'm going to take Texas, Alabama, and Ohio State all straight up, and none of them are going to lose. But there's always one that, you know, winning parlays is hard. And I think that's like a good way to look at it through the betting lens. Even if you're not a gambler, it's like, well, we have a Saturday slate that isn't necessarily jumping off the page like last weekend's did with high-end matchups. But like when you think about how much money is crossing hands in terms of these money line parlay bets, it's almost like a general certainty that one of these teams is going to win or lose, and it's going to go haywire.
Well, and that's what, John, when we do our pick segment, this week, I didn't realize it as it was happening because I didn't write everything down beforehand. I picked the games as we went. And there were several games that are just what you're talking about, where, so you got Alabama Vandy is a double-digit spread. Michigan State, Nebraska is one. Texas Tech, Houston is another one. And Mississippi State, Texas A&M is another one, where the only underdog I picked to cover was Vanderbilt. And I didn't think about it until it was over. And then that's exactly my thought. What Ari just said is like, it's hard to pick 3 or 4 favorites to win. And I think I may have messed that up.
Well, you never know. I mean, again, favorites, it tends to be, I mean, just to your point of like the sportsbook usually needs one underdog to win outright just to help with all the parlay liability that we'll get, as and it is very common just to add big favorites to a parlay to increase the payout. So the sportsbook often is rooting for underdogs, often rooting for an upset.
John, Heisman seems to be wide open. Let's go down that road. What are you seeing in the betting trends on that, and who might be a good value play?
The favorite seems to change every week. You know, first it was Arch Manning and Cade Klubnik. Then it was Carson Beck and Garrett Nussmeier. Now it's Dante Moore. He was 20-1 before the season began. He was 12-1 last week, and now he's a plus 750 favorite to win the Heisman. He had 248 yards passing, 3 touchdowns against Penn State. So a really impressive win. That's what vaulted him to the top of the leaderboard right now. But I will not be surprised if come, Sunday morning, we have a new odds favorite, because it's just, this might be the most wide open field I can remember.
It is amazing. And I was looking, so you guys send the emails out with the trends. There's a spreadsheet that you attach to it that has how everybody's moved over the from preseason through each week of the season. You actually have a column in the spreadsheet that just says after Mateer injury. It's basically, it's what shook everything up. But Who do you think has a chance to make the next move? Because it feels like Ty Simpson made a big move. Is it maybe Marcel Reed, or is it Pavia if he can win at Alabama?
What you had mentioned, Ty Simpson, and just for everyone listening, 55-1 before the season started, 20-1 last week, and now he's 10-1. So he's just sitting behind Dante Moore, right there, working to jump up and become a favorite. But he's 1,100 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. So he has the impressive stats. It's just going to depend on a team, right? One of these teams needs to take charge and become go on a run. And then I have a feeling that the quarterback will also get the Heisman love from bettors and from the odds makers.
Man, the thing that is so interesting to me about the Heisman race, guys, is that it also is kind of just like a mirror of the national championship too, right? Because a lot of these players that are there at the top of the board, you got Oregon, Miami, Ohio State, Bama, Indiana, all these teams that are at the top. There isn't a single team listed there that isn't technically or alive or somebody that you could see winning the national title. Maybe Indiana and Vandy would be on the outside looking in that discussion, but does that also
not Indiana yet? I mean, let's see what Indiana does against Oregon, Ari. But I mean, Indiana beat Illinois by 53. Like,
yeah,
I don't know about you, John, but I'm viewing them as a legitimate playoff team that can go in the playoff and win games. So the Carson Beck thing's interesting to me because he's the second leading favorite according to the odds right now. It doesn't feel like he's had to put up any kind of big numbers. And does he stay there if they just keep winning, or will there have to be some games where he just blows up and throws 350 yards and 4 touchdowns?
Yeah, just given his awareness from bettors, his odds won't come down unless there's a blow up. Like the trading team will leave him there just if you lengthen his odds, that'll just attract more action. So they're going to be happy with what they've got on him right now. I was just looking back through the odds to win the college football playoff. You mentioned India, still sitting at 40-1. So a bit of a long shot there if anyone wants to get on that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Indiana and Vandy is that I'm with you, Andy. I think that they could beat anybody on a given day. I don't know if they can win 4 in a row.
If I could take Indiana and make the semis, like that would be. Yeah. I don't think I would take them to win the national title because I don't know that they'd be able to win that many games in a row.
Yeah. What is the national championship money and who they're picking altering week by week, or is that still pretty steady?
It's still pretty steady. Again, we haven't had enough of a shakeup. Texas losing, that was to Ohio State. That was a good team, so that's not bad. Penn State losing to Oregon, that's not going to be a knock on them, especially with the expanded playoff. All these teams can easily get in with 1 or 2 losses. The top 10 or so has really been pretty steady.
Yeah, I'm looking here at value plays here, Andy, in terms of like numbers that you're getting and teams that could get hot. Ole Miss 20-1 and Miami 12-1 are the ones that jump out to me here.
I would think so, yeah. Especially Miami, if they beat Florida State this weekend, has a really clean path to a very high seed and a bye possibly. So I think that would be a big one. Ole Miss still has a lot of hoops to jump through, I think.
The way I look at this, guys, is if you get 20-1 or 15-1 or whatever, and you are like fairly certain that team is going to at least make the playoff, that at least gives you some like wiggle room down the line where if they win a game or 2 in the playoff that you can like start hedging out if you want to do that. But like, I feel like it's like a absolute certainty at this point. And you know how good I am, Andy, at being right when I say something's an absolute certainty. But like, I don't know what would have to happen for Miami to not make the playoff this year. Like, I feel like they're going to make the playoff. So if you go into it sitting on a 12-1 ticket at the beginning of the playoff, John, correct me if I'm wrong here, everybody who makes it for the most part that isn't a group of 5 team or a team that isn't traditionally known as somebody who can compete like an SMU or something is around 7-1 at that point, right? Like you would still have value going into the playoff if you were to take it now.
Yeah, I imagine you're going to have some really bunched up odds there. I mean, it might reflect what's on the odds board right now. There's, 8 to 10 teams all within that 5-1 to 10-1 range.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to see how this shakes out. Obviously, Miami, Florida State should give us a little more clarity on that this week, and then there's some next week that will give us even more. John, thank you so much. now I gotta watch that game in Gainesville very closely because you've given me a lot to think about there. Also, a lot to think about the game in Athens, and I wasn't even thinking about that game at all. So thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on, fellas.
Appreciate you, John. Thank you.
Yep.